Hi boys and girls, it's Miss Lily, and today we're going to be reading the book, The Best Nest. And this was one of my favorite books when I was little, so I wanted to read it to you. And I want you to pay attention to what they end up picking for their nest, because in the next video we're going to make our own bird nest by going on a scavenger hunt and finding things that birds would use. Mr. Bird was happy. He was so happy he had to sing. This was Mr. Bird's song. I love my house, I love my nest, in all the world my nest is best. Then Mrs. Bird came out of the house. It's not the best, she said. I'm tired of this old place, said Mrs. Bird. I hate it. Let's look for a new place right now. So they left their old place to look for a new one. This place looks nice, said Mr. Bird. Let's move in here. I'm going to look at this tree right here in this little hole. But somebody else had already moved in. So they looked at another house. This one looks nice, said Mr. Bird, and there's nobody in here. Do you guys think a shoe would be a good place for a bird to live? I'm not so sure. You're wrong, said Mrs. Bird. This house belongs to a foot. They went on looking. I like this one, said Mr. Bird. It was a pretty red flag on a roof. I've always wanted a house with a flag, said Mrs. Bird. Maybe this one will be all right. But it was not all right. I guess I made a mistake, said Mr. Bird. So it ended up being a mailbox, and the mailman came to put letters in there. You make too many mistakes, said Mrs. Bird. I'm going to pick the next house. And here it is, right here. They're going to fly in right here. They flew in, they looked around. Isn't it too big, asked Mr. Bird. I like this big place, said Mrs. Bird. This is the place to build our new nest. They went right to work. They needed many things to build their nest. First, they got some hay. They got some soda straws and broom straws, and they got some sweater strings. They got some stocking string and some mattress stuffing. They got some horse hair, and they got some human hair. So they're finding all kinds of different things for their nest. Soon they had all the hay, all the straw, all the string, all the stuffing, and all the horse hair, and all the man hair they could carry. They took it all back to build their nest. Mr. and Mrs. Bird worked very hard. It took them the rest of the morning to finish their nest. This nest is really the best, said Mrs. Bird. I want to stay here forever. Mr. Bird was very happy too. He flew to the top of the house. He sang a song again. I love our house, I love our nest, in all the world our nest is best. He was so busy singing he didn't even see Mr. Parker coming. Every day at 12 o'clock, Mr. Parker came to the church. Mr. Parker came to pull a rope, and the rope went up to the bird's new nest. The rope rang the big bell right under Mrs. Bird's nest. Bong, bong, bong. Mrs. Bird got out of there as fast as she could fly. When Mr. Bird came in, all he could see was a mess of hay and string and stuffing and horsehair and man hair and straws. Where was Mrs. Bird? I will look for her until I find her, said Mr. Bird. He looked high, he looked low, he looked everywhere for Mrs. Bird. Where do you guys think she went? She couldn't stay there because it was too loud. He looked down into a chimney, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. He looked down into a water barrel, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. Then he saw a big fat cat. There was a big fat smile on Fat Cat's face. There were some pretty brown feathers near the fat cat's mouth. Mr. Bird began to cry. Oh dear, he cried, the big fat cat must have eaten Mrs. Bird. Mr. Bird flew off. I'll never see Mrs. Bird again, he cried. It was getting dark. It began to rain. It rained harder and harder, and Mr. Bird could not see where he was going. Crash! Mr. Bird bumped into something. It was his old house, that old house that Mrs. Bird hated. I'll go inside, said Mr. Bird. I'll rest here until the rain stops. Mr. Bird went in, and there was Mrs. Bird sitting there saying, I love my house, I love my nest, in all the world my nest is best. You? Here? Gasped Mr. Bird. I thought you hated this old nest. Mrs. Bird smiled. I used to hate it, she said, but a mother bird can change her mind, you see. There's no nest like an old nest for a brand new bird. You see, there's a little egg. There's gonna be a baby bird. And when the egg popped open, the new bird thought so too. The end. So I hope you guys liked that book about them making their nests, and I hope you remember some of the things that they were looking for, like grass and straw and string and wool, because when we go out to look for things for our nest, we're going to look for some of those things too. Hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video so we can make our nests together. Bye guys.